this example, we are getting into some of the harder problems, some of the more challenging problems. That's going to have a little bit more work and some things we need to talk about that, if you're not expecting them, can throw rocks in your way. So, as always, we're looking for the center and the radius. That is what we need for the equation. So write the equation of a circle that passes through the point -7, -1, that's not the center, and has a center at 2, -5. So I do have my center. I do not have my radius, but I can get my radius from this information. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture over here. So it has a center at 2, -5, and passes through the point -7, -1. So we can just kind of pretend that that point is right there. And that would be my radius. So the formula that I would need to get that space between those 2 points, and I say space because I'd give it away if I didn't, but the formula to get the space between those 2 points is the distance formula. So let's go back to our notes real quick and look at the distance formula. So the distance formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. All right, so we've practiced that formula, so we're just going to use it now. So let's use that. So the distance is going to be the square root of, I'm going to set up my template here. Okay, so x2, let's just use the points up here at the top. So x2 is 2, x1 is -7. You can actually switch those around and it'll be okay, but just be consistent. If you start with this point for the x, make sure you start with this point for the y. Just be careful with that. So then for the y's, start with this one. So -5 minus -1. Now I'm going to grab my calculator and I'm going to show you something real quick. So the square root of 2 minus -7 squared plus -5 minus 1 squared. Oops, I did not put the squared. That is not correct. So disregard that, please. All right, so the answer is a big decimal, kind of an ugly decimal. So what we're going to do, actually, we don't want our radius to be a decimal because that's actually going to cause more trouble than it's worth. So what I'm going to do, a little trick I'm going to show you. I'm going to leave the square root, and I'm just going to type in what's underneath the square root. It may seem really weird right now, but it is going to make total sense here in about a minute and a half. Okay, so let's just type in what's underneath there. So instead of writing this as the decimal equivalent, because the square root of 97 is what I got earlier, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of writing it, and it's actually going to be so much better here in just a moment. So leave the square root. Don't type that in your calculator. Just type what's underneath the square root and leave the square root alone. That's going to be your trick for these types of problems. So I'm going to leave the radius as the square root of 97. Those are my two things for my formula, as always. All right, so all this work just to get the formula, but we're okay. Set up my template. So lots of formulas to keep straight, so just make sure you're being really careful. Make sure you're keeping your work organized. So center point, let's bring down the x value, bring down the y value. Now the radius, let's talk about that real quick. My writing is terrible today, guys. So sorry. I get so ahead of myself here. I don't leave myself enough space. Now, simplification. That one is fine. Those two negatives become a positive. Now, that's square root of 97 squared. If you know something about squares and square roots, you already know where I'm going with this. But if I do the square root of 97 squared, and the key about this is to make sure the squared is on the outside, okay? But square and square root are actually opposite operations or inverse operations. So really what they're going to do is just cancel each other out. And I'm just going to have a 97 there. It's not a perfect square. That's why it came out to be that weird decimal. But if I had done that weird decimal, let's go back up and grab that and squared it, it would have been 97 anyway. All right, so it's just going to save us a little bit of work. So that's probably the trickiest thing that we've encountered so far. But if you will just use that little trick I gave you right there, you're going to be just fine.